Msgr Karel Kasteel, you have been in the priesthood for 63 years, I
How
think.
do you know? But it's true.
And 6 or 7 popes.
7.
7 popes.
It's a great
And your
privilege.
father knew Pope Pius XII.
And the 11th.
And the 11th.
When my father married in Rome in 1927, my father and mother were received by Pope Pius XI, and my father was then one of the best known Catholic writers in the country, and the Pope blessed his pen. And they had a wonderful audience because Pope Pius XI was very interested in what was going on in the Netherlands at that time.
And you have also been in the Curia. Did you? I read just about Cor Unum. Were you there from the beginning?
No, the Cor Unum was founded by Saint Paul VI because of the wish of many bishops in the Vatican II Council who wanted a department in Rome for the poor, specifically for the poor. And Paul VI founded this, but of course once you found a new department, now it's called dicastery, you also have to give it competences. What would that pontifical council, one heart, what would it do? So the first competence was to watch over the social doctrine of the church, whether that was really applied or not. Whenever the popes had a doctrine, magisterium on social doctrine, like Rerum Novarum, Quadragesimo Anno, etc., and the other ones that came later, did that really help, and what effect did it have in the church? So then quickly, soon after, St. Paul VI decided that he would give that department, Cor Unum, the oversight of all the aid agencies of the church, about 2,000 or more, like all the Caritas and all the other ones. And that was a very delicate matter because they were all autonomous, and yet it was necessary to harmonize all those organizations. And so, because it was so delicate, the Pope appointed his Secretary of State, Cardinal Villot, Jean Villot, as first president. And after Cardinal Villot, it was this wonderful man I had the honor to serve, Cardinal Bernardin Gantin from Cotonou, Benin, who came to Rome and later also became Dean of the College of Cardinals. And the third president was also an extraordinary person called Cardinal Roger Etchegaray, who had been president of the French Episcopal Conference and who was a great confidant of the popes, who sent him all over the world whenever there were very delicate matters. Those were the cardinal presidents until Cardinal Cordes, and then after Cardinal Cordes there was Cardinal Sarah.
Yeah.
And after Cardinal Sarah, it was decided to unite this department with the other Department of Justice and Peace and 2 other ones. Mm-hmm. So now it's called the Dicaster for Integral Human Development. Mm-hmm. Of course, those cardinals who were the presidents of Cor Unum did not have much time, except for the most important matters, for that department, because it was very complicated. So the secretaries had to do the job, the secretary generals of the department. And the first one was a remarkable man, a Dominican from Switzerland, Henri de Rietmatten, of one of those well-known Swiss families, who opened the gates of Geneva to the Holy See, because Geneva tried to stop the Catholic Church from coming in those important agencies of the United Nations and all that. So Henri de Rietmatten was really a great man. on the very day the Holy Father sent him a note that he was to be a cardinal, he died. He died. I think he worked too hard. Then we had a wonderful priest from the Mission Étrangère de Paris as secretary, and he was Père du Noyer de l'Écheren, very well known. After him, my predecessor, who later became Archbishop of Popayan in Colombia, and then I had to do the job for about 15 years. And then there was my successor, who is now Joint Secretary of Propaganda Fide. So, in a nutshell, of course, we also had undersecretaries and a wonderful staff. So, it really, the dicastery did a lot for the poor, and I must say, I discovered the enormous dimension of charity in the church, only there. Before I was appointed there by St. John Paul II, I was for 30 years in Propaganda Fide. And there, during those 30 years, I was also in charge of the Nordic countries. So I often had to come to Sweden, to Denmark, to Finland, to Norway, to Iceland. And I remember very well that the first time the Cardinal Prefect, Cardinal Agajanyan, called me into his study when I was just appointed. He said, on that table are the 5 volumes of the Apostolic Visitation done by Bishop Hansen, who was a Dutch bishop, in the Nordic countries. The first thing you have to do is to study those books very carefully, because they give a very good picture of the church in the Nordic countries as it is today. This was 1963. I was 5 years a priest. And I was very impressed by what I read. To just give you one example, in the Iceland book, the bishop asks a missionary somewhere way out, how long have you been here, Father? And the father says, Your Excellency, 36 years. How many converts have you had? None, Your Excellency. Then what did you do? I stayed, Your Excellency. And now there are many Catholics there. It takes a long time sometimes for the seed to come up, you see. So that made me understand that one little
seed
anecdote, if you want to call it that. And of course, little by little, I got to know the history of these 5 countries. I knew the bishops very well. I started off for a short while with Bishop Nelson here in Stockholm. And of course, Bishop Taylor, whom I knew well, and so on. So, and of course, Cardinal Arborelius, whom I really, I can say I loved him from the very first day I saw him. His mother, of course. So, and then, well, I will not tire you with all the other. Of course, in Reykjavik, the bishop was my greatest friend. Bishop Gijzen, and as you know, his uncle was the first Vicar Apostolic after the Reformation in Iceland, the one who built the cathedral and all that. So there's very, very many links. Bishop Mangers in Oslo, he was also from my country, the Netherlands. Bishop Cobben in Helsinki. And, well, we don't have enough time to talk about all these things.
No, but you have traveled a lot in many other parts of the world.
I have, because during those 30 years in Propaganda Fide, I was not only in charge of kind of Nordic countries, but you see, there are 1,000 dioceses under Propaganda Fide, and I was given also responsibility for other parts, and especially as working as under secretary, you had the whole bunch. So, and in many countries, there were no nunsuages yet. So if a new hierarchy had to be erected, I remember the first ones were in Papua New Guinea, and that was not easy. In the Pacific, Micronesia, Melanesia, Polynesia, and the Caribbean. Those were the three big first jobs. And then at the same time, when I was in Rome, I was a private secretary of the cardinal prefect, Argenyan, who is now being in process of beatification. The first thing I have to do when I come back to Rome is go to the tribunal, and it takes 2 days, I think. And I have to tell them everything that I remember of that cardinal. So this is in a nutshell. There have been many, many other things I've had to do.
You have then seen all the changes
Yes.
of the church
Yes.
during, you said 6 or 7 popes.
But you know what the Holy Father, what the French say? Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more it changes, the more it's the same thing.
We see now also an interest for the traditional mass, which is quite controversial today, but in
Not
Sweden.
really if you know everything about it.
Yeah.
You see, it's some people get agitated about all sorts of things, but nothing has really happened. The only thing that happened was that the Holy Father wants people to do these things in order, you see, and never use the two. He knows better than anybody else that the Vetus Ordo is one of the 23 or 25 rites in the church, and it's all rites that are approved by the church are good. Some people may like some rites better than others, but that's a personal taste. And the Vetus Ordo, of course, I always say, is excellent in many in monasteries, in people who have a special spirituality. Say, if you follow the great 18th century French mystic writers of the Eucharist, then the old rite is perfect. But the Novus Ordo also has its advantages. Personally, I preferred the Vetus Ordo because I was ordained there. I had 10 years that I only could say, of course, the Vetus Ordo, because there was no Novus Ordo. And when the Novus Ordo came, we were asked to use that, but I was able, where I was chaplain, to continue to say to celebrate Holy Mass in Latin, in the Novus Ordo. And so I
you
was
do
very
fluently.
happy. I had no problem in there, and besides, it all depends on how you celebrate. Any rite is beautiful if you celebrate it well, but if you don't celebrate with great reverence and great knowledge also of the liturgical, then the old rite can be terrible if people don't observe the rubrics, and I see it sometimes.
We have such problems now in Sweden with criminality among young people.
I have heard that, yes.
And there are shootings almost every week.
I hear that, yes.
And I have contact with one I have been in prison, he knows the whole world there. And the solution from the politicians is more police, more prison, more punishment. And to me, they miss what something must go before they do these things. They have something in their head. And to me, we are born with a sense of conscience.
Of course.
And so a child knows when it has done something wrong.
The difference between good and bad.
And
yes.
I think they miss this whole thing in the discussions in Sweden now. That
If there is no spirituality of any kind, you cannot expect people to make a good use of their conscience. God has given us conscience to distinguish between good and bad. But in order to use that faculty of conscience we have in the right way, you must have spirituality. Otherwise, the conscience doesn't work rightly. It doesn't do its job, so to say.
And science cannot teach us about
no.
that.
Science and religion have to work together, but not one without the other. You cannot have religion without science, and St. John Paul II wrote an encyclical on that. So it's simple. I can tell you how much I was able to talk about this with important people who have to make decisions, for the whole country. I cannot mention the name, but there was a sovereign of a country who also had that problem. But thank God, once he read that encyclical, between that encyclical where the then Pope explained quite clearly why science cannot go without religion and religion cannot go without science. It's not that religion substitutes science or that science substitutes religion, neither. You need both. And of course, coming back to the Pope, the Pope has always been considered as the father of sovereigns and kings and presidents of republics or whatever. So they all come. There's only one Pope in the world, and all these people come to see the Pope when they have problems. So why is that? Because they know that they need a guideline. And the Pope knows how to use his moral leadership so as to make people understand how religion, spirituality, call it what you wish, must in somehow or other enter into the picture. As a human being, I am not only a body, I also have a spirit. Without that spirit, my body would be dead. Just as my body doesn't live, it goes both ways. So if I don't have spirituality, in other words, no spirit, I'm a zombie or whatever you want to say. You see, so you need spirituality. It's an indicator, if you wish. And if it can be one of the great spiritualities of the past or philosophies of the East, but we as Christians believe that Christ has given us the full truth. He has revelated us the full truth, and that the Church Universal, the Catholic Church, has the duty to proclaim the truth that Christ has indicated to us. So it's simple.
No, and there is, unfortunately now, even the liberal parties want to limit or even to stop these so-called confessional schools in Sweden. We have not many. And actually it's just the owner that's confessional and not the teaching.
Well, I would be highly surprised because Sweden has always been considered a free country. If you refuse the parents the right to have their children educated according to their wishes, except if they were criminals, that's another matter, then you're not in a free country. We've had the same problem in the Netherlands. Thank God we solved it. It has not been solved entirely in all countries, also because in some countries, if you want to send your child to a private school, it's much more expensive than to a state school. So that's also not the way it should be. But luckily, happily, in my country, in the Netherlands, education is has been totally rendered equal, whether state, public or private. As long as there's a group of people who want to have a school and they follow the rules of how many people and what they should do, the state pays for it. So that is the ideal, that parents have the freedom to educate their children according to their convictions.